My golden siblings got $370,000 from our parents while I got zero, and they still mock me. Alright, so here's the deal. I'm 32, and I've pretty much always known I was the black sheep of my family. My parents, well, they had this thing where my older sister Ashley and my younger brother Kyle were practically golden. Like, no matter what they did, it was always worth celebrating. And I don't mean small stuff either. Growing up, Ashley could ace a test and it was like she solved world hunger. Kyle made a goal at a soccer game? Boom, instant hero. Meanwhile, I'd come home with decent grades or finish a part-time job shift, and all I'd get was a, "That's nice." But the real kicker, yeah, I know I'm not supposed to say that, but seriously, was when all this favoritism slapped me in the face during my wedding prep. You don't really notice how much crap you've been putting up with until something important happens, like a wedding, and it all just bubbles up. But let me backtrack for a sec. I didn't always think it was that bad. As a kid, I guess I just assumed it was normal. Ashley got a brand new car when she turned 16. It was some fancy model I can't even remember because, to be honest, I stopped caring. I got, well, nothing. Actually, that's a lie. I got a used Honda, but only after busting my ass at 2 part-time jobs for like 2 years. And even then, my parents made it sound like they did me this huge favor by allowing me to buy my own car. But again, I thought it was just how things were. Like maybe I didn't deserve more because I wasn't as special. Ashley was all about academics. She was the smart one, destined to go to med school. Kyle was the athlete. Soccer camps every summer, and our parents even got him a private coach. And me? Well, I was just regular old me, working part-time jobs and scraping by. No one was offering to send me to any fancy camps. I stayed home, mowing lawns, saving for college, and hoping things would change when we all grew up. Spoiler, they didn't. When it was time for college, I really thought maybe I'd get a break. Like, okay, maybe they'd help me out since they covered everything for Ashley's private school tuition, and Kyle was already getting recruited by top schools for his sports stuff. But nope, they said something like, "Well, you're smart enough to figure it out." And that was it. I had to piece together scholarships, loans, and every part-time job I could get to afford community college before I transferred to a state school. Meanwhile, Ashley's tuition was fully covered, and Kyle had recruiters paying his way. Yeah, it stung, but I told myself, I'll show them by working harder. Fast forward to me meeting Natalie. She's honestly the best thing that ever happened to me. She didn't care about all that flashy stuff. Didn't care that I didn't have a fancy degree or wasn't pulling 6 figures like my siblings. She loved me for me. After 3 years of dating, I proposed and we were both on cloud 9. We started planning a small, intimate wedding, something we could afford without taking out a massive loan or, heaven forbid, asking my parents for help. That's when the real crap started to unravel. See, my mom, Linda, suddenly became super invested in the wedding plans. But it wasn't out of love or excitement. Nope. She kept pushing for a bigger event, saying stuff like, "Why don't you have it at that fancy golf resort? We can invite the whole family." I knew where this was going. It wasn't about us. It was about showing off to her friends and our extended family. I tried to be polite. I said, "Mom, we're happy with our small wedding. We've budgeted everything, and it's what we want." But she just wouldn't let up. "We'll help out," she insisted. I asked how much she was willing to chip in. She said $5,000, like it was some massive contribution. Keep in mind, she'd just spent over $150,000 on Ashley's wedding 2 years earlier. And that was just the wedding. That didn't include all the extras. Honeymoon, gifts, whatever. It wasn't even the money that pissed me off, though. It was the principle. She couldn't see that our wedding was important to us, not because of how much it cost, but because it was about us starting our lives together. Every time I declined her help, she looked at me like I'd insulted her, like it was somehow offensive that I didn't want to throw a huge party on her dime. Then, about a week before the wedding, I'm in the kitchen at my parents' house, and I overhear Kyle on the phone with my dad. He's talking about needing another $50K for a kitchen remodel. I'm not eavesdropping or anything, they're just talking really loudly. I hear my dad casually agree, like it's no big deal. Another 50 grand, just like that. I felt like my stomach dropped. Later that day, I confronted my dad. I asked if he was really giving Kyle $50K just for a remodel. He got all defensive, telling me it wasn't any of my business, but I couldn't let it go. I pressed harder, asking how much they'd given Kyle and Ashley over the years. That's when he snapped. "Fine, you want to know? Yes, we've helped your brother and sister financially. They have goals and ambitions that require support. Your sister is in her medical residency, and your brother is starting his own business. What do you need money for? To buy more video games?" That's when everything clicked into place for me. It wasn't just that they liked my siblings more, they respected them more. They saw Kyle and Ashley as these driven, ambitious people worth investing in, while I was... what? Just this background character in the family who never lived up to their expectations. I was speechless. All those years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, like I wasn't important enough for their attention or support, made horrible sense now. My parents didn't think I was worth investing in. In their eyes, I was the failure, the one who didn't have anything worth helping. I stormed out of the house without saying another word. When I got home, I told Natalie everything. She was furious on my behalf, but I just felt numb. The wedding was coming up, and I didn't want to let all this family drama ruin what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But man, the anger didn't go away. I thought maybe it would, like if I ignored it long enough, it'd disappear. Spoiler alert, it didn't. I just couldn't shake this feeling that my family had written me off. They had their perfect daughter, their golden son, and then there was me, dependable Tom, who would always be fine without their help. Little did I know the worst was yet to come at the actual wedding, but that's a whole other mess. All right, so let's get into the actual wedding day. I was excited, obviously. Like, this is the day I've been waiting for. I'm marrying the love of my life, Natalie, and I wanted everything to go perfectly, or as close to perfect as possible. But let me tell you, when you've got a family like mine, perfect is not in the cards. First off, I'll say the ceremony itself was beautiful. Natalie looked incredible in her dress, and I couldn't believe she was marrying me. We had it at this small park that had a really nice view. Nothing fancy, but it fit our style. Small, intimate, only our closest friends and family. Honestly, if the day had just ended after we said our vows, it would have been the best day of my life. But then, people started talking. So after the ceremony, we get to the reception. We didn't go crazy with the decorations. Just a few simple touches like fairy lights and some flowers. We wanted it to feel cozy, not like some grand ballroom event. But right from the moment we sat down, I could feel the tension in the air. My mom, Linda, is already giving me that look, like she's disappointed in how everything turned out. And I'm like, really? On my wedding day, this is the vibe you're going with? We sit down for dinner and immediately the passive-aggressive comments start. My sister Ashley leans over to my mom and says, "The food's nice, but isn't it a bit casual?" I overhear her and my blood is already starting to boil. Casual? We've got a nice catered meal here, not appetizers and crackers. But of course, nothing's good enough for her because, it's not a 5-star restaurant like her wedding had. She couldn't care less about what the day was supposed to be about. She's just focused on whether it's fancy enough for her tastes. Then there's Kyle, my golden boy brother, who's practically laughing at the whole setup. At one point, he's like, "Yeah, I'm taking everyone out to this fancy steakhouse later because I doubt anyone's getting full on this stuff." And I just froze. I was trying so hard to keep it together because, trust me, I didn't want to snap on my own wedding day. But inside, I was losing it. My own brother basically announces that our wedding isn't good enough for him and his bougie taste. He's treating it like some kind of joke, and it's humiliating. Natalie could sense I was getting pissed off, so she squeezed my hand and gave me this look that said, "It's okay, just let it go." I tried. I really tried. But every time I looked over at my family, they were either whispering to each other or checking their phones like they had better places to be. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is supposed to be one of the most important days of my life, and my own family can't even pretend to care. But the final straw, the moment where I was this close to losing it, was during the speeches. You know how at weddings, people get up, say nice things about the couple, maybe share some memories? Well, my dad stands up, glass in hand, and I'm thinking, all right, maybe he'll surprise me with something heartfelt. I should have known better. He starts talking about Ashley and Kyle, going on and on about their accomplishments. Ashley's medical career, Kyle's entrepreneurial spirit, all that crap. I'm just sitting there waiting for my turn, hoping for something. When he finally gets to me, all he says is, "And Tom, well, he's always been dependable." That's it. Dependable. Like I'm some piece of old furniture or a tool he keeps in the shed. Not hardworking, not smart, just dependable. It was like the ultimate slap in the face. I felt my face go red and I could see some of our friends shifting awkwardly in their seats, like they could sense how messed up the whole thing was. Natalie squeezed my hand again, probably because she knew I was 2 seconds away from flipping a table. But I didn't say anything. Not right then. I forced a smile, pretended like everything was fine, and let the night go on. But inside I was seething. Here we are, celebrating my wedding, one of the biggest days of my life, and my dad can't even say one nice thing about me without bringing up my siblings first. It was always the same damn story. Ashley and Kyle are the stars, and I'm just the guy who shows up and doesn't mess things up too much. The rest of the night was a blur. I went through the motions, smiled for pictures, danced with Natalie, but I was barely present. Every time I saw my family, I could feel that anger bubbling up again. At one point, I caught Ashley rolling her eyes during one of the toasts like she was so bored by the whole thing. I couldn't take it anymore, so I went outside for some air, just trying to get my head straight. That's when Natalie came out to find me. She hugged me, asked if I was okay, and I just broke down. I told her everything. How I felt like my own family didn't give a damn about me or this wedding. How they'd spent the whole night criticizing, making snide comments, acting like our day wasn't good enough for them. Natalie hugged me tight and told me what I needed to hear, that it didn't matter what they thought. What mattered was that we were happy. She was right, of course, but that didn't make it hurt any less. I wanted so badly for my family to be proud of me, to just be happy for me for once in my life. But it was clear that wasn't going to happen. They didn't see this wedding as a celebration of our love. To them, it was just another chance to compare me to Ashley and Kyle, to remind me that I was never going to be as good as them in their eyes. The night finally wrapped up, and as we said goodbye to our guests, I could tell my parents were just waiting for it to be over. My mom gave me this half-hearted hug, said, "It was nice, honey," and then immediately started talking to Ashley about some vacation she was planning. Kyle didn't even bother to say goodbye. He just left without a word. Natalie and I drove home in silence. I could tell she was upset for me, but there wasn't much to say. We both knew what had happened. My family had made it painfully clear where I stood, and it wasn't on the same level as Ashley and Kyle. Not even close. When we got home, I just sat there, staring at the wall, feeling like I'd just been punched in the gut. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but thanks to my family, it was tainted by all this bitterness and resentment. I knew things weren't going to magically get better, but at that moment, I promised myself one thing. I wasn't going to let them ruin any more of my life. This was my wedding, my future with Natalie. And if they couldn't be happy for me, then screw it. I'd be happy without them. But man, I had no idea how much worse things would get at the family dinner a week later. That's when everything really hit the fan. Update 1. Alright, so let's talk about the family dinner that happened a week after the wedding. I wasn't planning on bringing anything up, not after how the wedding went down. I figured it was pointless, you know? What's the point of starting something when they clearly don't care? But of course, things don't always go how you expect, and this dinner turned into an absolute disaster. So it's the usual setup. My parents' house, a big dinner with the whole family. They like to do these family dinners once a month, and it's always the same. Ashley and Kyle show up, brag about their lives, and I just sit there like I'm watching a performance. I had told Natalie I was going to try and keep quiet, not stir the pot. Honestly, I was still kind of raw from the wedding. I hadn't fully processed how messed up everything felt. We all sit down at the table, and right away, it starts. Ashley, of course, is talking about some luxury vacation she and her husband are planning. They're going to Italy or Greece or whatever, and she's casually mentioning how our parents gifted them frequent flyer miles for first-class tickets. I'm trying to tune it out, but it's hard when they're sitting right across from me, laughing like everything's great. Then Kyle jumps in, talking about his new boat. Yes, boat. The one he just bought because, apparently, Dad helped him invest in something or other that made him enough money to buy it. He's going on about how he's taking everyone out on the lake next weekend, already planning a big family BBQ or something. And I'm just sitting there, shoving food around my plate, feeling like an absolute outsider. Here's the thing. It's not even about the money at this point. I don't need a damn boat or first-class tickets. What really pissed me off was how they acted like this was all normal. Like it was totally fine for our parents to keep throwing money at them while I'm sitting there, barely making rent some months. They didn't even notice the contrast. They're just living in their little bubble, completely oblivious to how unfair it all is. And then my mom turns to me, with that sweet but judgmental tone she always uses, and asks, "So honey, how was the honeymoon? Did you and Natalie have a nice time at that little bed and breakfast?" That was the moment I lost it. I wasn't planning on saying anything, but it just came out. I said something like, "You know what, Mom? Yeah, we had an amazing time. Because unlike some people, we don't need 5-star resorts and first-class flights to enjoy ourselves. We appreciate what we have because we worked for it." The table went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone's staring at me and I can feel the tension rising, but I'm too far gone to care at this point. All those years of being pushed aside, of watching my siblings get everything handed to them, just boiled over. I kept going. Do you guys even realize how much Mom and Dad have given you? All I've heard tonight is bragging about vacations and boats. Do you even understand how unfair that is? I've worked my ass off for everything I have, and all I got was a measly $5,000 for my wedding, which, by the way, You all criticized the entire time. Ashley, of course, jumps in, looking all offended. That's not fair, Tom. We've worked hard for what we have. And I just couldn't help but laugh, like a bitter, frustrated laugh. Oh, really? Did you work hard for that $150,000 wedding mom and dad paid for? Or the down payment on your house? Or how about Kyle's boat? Was that hard-earned too? Or was it just another investment handed to you by dad? Kyle starts to sputter, trying to defend himself, but I cut him off. You know what? Between the two of you, you've gotten over $370,000 in the last 5 years, and that's not even counting the college tuitions, the cars, the luxury trips. Meanwhile, I've been scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck trying to pay off my student loans. But none of that matters to you, does it? Because you're too busy enjoying the life mom and dad bought for you. At this point, my dad's face is bright red, and he slams his hand down on the table. Now listen here, young man. What we choose to do with our money is our business. Your siblings have ambition. They have goals. They're doing something with their lives. That's when I snapped back. And I'm not? Is that what you're saying? I've worked my ass off to get where I am without a single handout from you. I put myself through school. I earned every promotion at my job. I saved for years to be able to marry Natalie. But none of that matters, does it? Because I'm not a doctor or a hotshot entrepreneur. I'm just dependable, right? My dad didn't even know what to say at that point. The whole table was silent. Ashley looked like she'd been slapped. Kyle just stared at his plate, avoiding eye contact. And my mom? She had tears in her eyes, but I didn't feel bad for her. Not after everything they'd put me through. I stood up, pushing my chair back so hard it scraped against the floor. You know what? I don't need your money. I don't need your approval. What I needed was your love and support, but clearly that was too much to ask for. I started to walk out, but right before I got to the door, I turned around and said, "Oh, and by the way, that little bed and breakfast where Natalie and I had our honeymoon, it was perfect, because we were together. Maybe if you all spent less time counting your money and more time appreciating what really matters, you'd understand that." And then I left. As soon as I got in the car, my hands were shaking. I was so angry, but at the same time, I felt this weird sense of relief. Like for the first time, I'd finally stood up for myself. I didn't care what they thought anymore. I didn't need their approval. I was done being the dependable one who just silently put up with their crap. When I got home, Natalie was waiting for me. She didn't even have to ask what happened. One look at me, and she knew. I sat down on the couch, and she hugged me while I vented about the whole dinner, how it felt like they'd never really cared about me. And for the first time in a long time, I realized something. I didn't need them. I had Natalie. I had our life together. And that was enough. I wasn't going to let them control my happiness anymore. Update 2. Alright, so after that dinner, I didn't talk to my family for a while. Honestly, I needed a break from all the drama. I felt like I had finally stood up for myself, and I didn't want to deal with their nonsense anymore. I just focused on my life with Natalie, trying to put everything behind me. But of course, family being family, they couldn't leave things alone for too long. About a week after the dinner, my phone starts blowing up with messages from my parents and siblings. At first, I ignored them. I wasn't in the mood to rehash the same old arguments or hear more excuses about why I was treated like crap my whole life. But then, my mom left me this voicemail, crying, saying she was sorry, and that we needed to fix this. I'll admit, that got to me a little. I mean, she's still my mom. And hearing her upset like that, well, it made me feel something, even if I wasn't sure what it was. Natalie encouraged me to meet up with them, just to see what they had to say. She didn't push me or anything, but she reminded me that closure might help, even if nothing really changes. So, after thinking it over, I agreed to meet my parents for coffee. Just them. No Ashley, no Kyle. I figured it'd be easier to deal with them without the extra stress of my siblings around. So we meet at this little cafe near their house. And right away, the vibe is awkward as hell. My mom's sitting there with her hands clasped like she's trying to hold herself together, and my dad's staring into his coffee cup, not saying much. I sit down and we do the whole polite small talk thing for a few minutes, which felt so weird, like we were strangers or something. But eventually, I just cut to the chase. "So," I said, "what is it you guys wanted to talk about?" My mom looked at my dad like she was waiting for him to say something first. But when he didn't, she just jumped in. "Tom, we're so sorry if we made you feel like you weren't as important as your siblings. That was never our intention." I sat there for a second, letting that sink in. "If you made me feel that way," I repeated, not even trying to hide the sarcasm. "It wasn't just a feeling, Mom. It's been pretty clear my whole life that Ashley and Kyle were the priorities." She started to cry again, and I could tell my dad was getting uncomfortable. but I didn't back down. Look, I'm not here to make you feel bad. I'm just trying to understand how you could treat your own kid like he doesn't matter. That's when my dad finally spoke up. Tom, it's not that we didn't care about you. We thought you were fine. You never asked for help, and you always seemed to manage on your own. Your sister and brother needed more support, and we just tried to be there for them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So because I didn't ask for help, you just assumed I didn't need any? You do realize how messed up that is, right? I didn't ask for help because I knew you wouldn't give it to me. I learned pretty early on that you'd only help Ashley and Kyle. My mom wiped her eyes and said, "We didn't mean to make you feel left out. We just thought you were more independent." I shook my head, trying to keep my frustration in check. Being independent wasn't exactly a choice. It's what I had to do because you guys made it pretty clear that I wasn't going to get the same treatment as them. There was a long pause after that, and I could see my dad struggling to find the right words. "We're sorry, Tom," he finally said, "but we can't change the past. We made mistakes, but we're trying to fix things now." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But I'd heard stuff like this before. Empty apologies with no real change. Still, part of me wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, to see if maybe this time would be different. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied. "But it's not just about the past. It's about how things are right now. You guys still treat Ashley and Kyle like they're more important, like their lives are somehow more worthy of your support. I'm not asking for handouts, but I just want to feel like you actually care about what's going on in my life." My mom nodded quickly, like she was desperate for me to forgive her. "We do care, Tom. We love you, and we want to make things right." I sighed, feeling the weight of the conversation. "Look, I'm willing to try and move forward, but things have to change. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not." My dad gave a small nod, and for the first time, he actually looked me in the eye. "We'll try, Tom. We'll try to do better." The conversation wrapped up soon after that. It wasn't a magical fix or anything, more like a small step towards some kind of resolution. I left the cafe feeling, I don't know, maybe cautiously hopeful. I didn't expect everything to suddenly be perfect, but at least they seemed to understand how much they'd hurt me. Whether or not they'd actually change, well, that was a different story. A few days later, I got a text from Ashley. It was short and awkward, but she apologized for her behavior at the wedding, saying she didn't mean to upset me and that she'd been jealous of how happy Natalie and I were. I didn't fully buy it, but at least it was something. I guess it was her way of trying to patch things up, even if she didn't really understand the full extent of what she'd done. Kyle didn't reach out right away. It took him a couple of weeks, actually, but when he finally called, we had a long, honest talk about our childhood and how the favoritism had affected our relationship. He admitted that he hadn't really noticed it before and that he'd always assumed I was fine because, like my parents said, I never asked for help. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it felt like maybe we could start rebuilding our relationship, slowly but surely. 6 months later, things were different. Not perfect, but better. My parents made more of an effort to include me in things and check in on how Natalie and I were doing. The dynamic with Ashley and Kyle was still a work in progress, but there was at least some understanding now that hadn't been there before. And as for me, I realized that no matter what happens with my family, I've got Natalie, and that's what really matters. We're talking about starting a family of our own, and I'm determined to break the cycle of favoritism and conditional love. My kids will know they're valued for who they are, not for how much they achieve. It hasn't been easy, and I'm sure there'll be more bumps along the way, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally moving in the right direction. Update 3. Alright, so things were going okay for a bit after that talk with my parents and the whole family dinner blow up. Like I said, it wasn't perfect, but it felt like maybe we were all finally on the same page, or at least trying to be. But of course, life has a funny way of messing with you when you least expect it. Just when I thought things were calming down, something happened that sent everything spiraling again. So about 2 months after that awkward cafe meeting with my parents, Natalie and I were hanging out at home. We just started talking seriously about trying for kids, and honestly, it was exciting. After all the family drama, it felt good to focus on our future, on building our own family that wasn't wrapped up in all that dysfunction. But one afternoon, I get this random message from Ashley. At first, I thought it was another apology or something, but no, it was worse. She basically asked if I could loan her $10,000 for some kind of emergency. She didn't explain what the emergency was, just said she'd pay me back soon. I stared at my phone for a solid minute, just trying to process it. After everything that had happened, After all the crap about favoritism and them getting all the financial support, now she was asking me for money. It felt like a slap in the face. I didn't even know how to respond at first. I mean, yeah, it was my sister, but the audacity of her to ask for money after everything I'd laid out during that family dinner. I was pretty blunt in my reply. I just said, "No, I can't help you." That was it. No explanation, no sorry, nothing. I didn't owe her that after the way she'd acted for years. Well, of course, that set off a whole chain of events. First, Ashley blows up my phone with texts, accusing me of being selfish, saying I was abandoning her when she needed help. She didn't seem to remember that I was the one who never got help when I needed it. I didn't even engage. I just ignored her texts, figuring she'd cool off and leave me alone. But I was wrong. The next day, my mom calls. I could already tell from her voice that she was upset. She starts going on about how Ashley's going through a tough time and how family helps family. She actually had the nerve to say, "You know, if the roles were reversed, Ashley would help you." I couldn't help but laugh a little at that. If the roles were reversed. Ashley had been on the receiving end of help from our parents her whole life. She'd never had to be in a position where she had to ask me for help because she always got everything handed to her. I cut my mom off and said, "Mom, I've had to help myself for 32 years. No one's ever offered to bail me out, so why am I suddenly responsible for bailing out Ashley? She can figure it out just like I had to." My mom didn't have much to say after that, but she tried to guilt trip me, saying things like, "We're a family, Tom. You need to be there for each other." I couldn't take it anymore. "Mom," I said, "Ashley and Kyle have been there for each other their whole lives with your help. Now you expect me to just step in and fix things? No, I'm done with that." We ended the call on a pretty sour note. I could feel the tension building again, like all the progress we'd made was starting to unravel. I thought maybe things would calm down after that, but nope, things got even worse. A few days later, I get this long email from my dad. It wasn't his usual style, which was surprising. He's normally the type to keep things short and to the point, but this was a full-on essay. He went on and on about how I needed to forgive and forget, and how Ashley was in a bad spot financially because her husband had lost his job. He basically guilted me the whole time, trying to make me feel like the bad guy for not stepping in to save my sister. The thing is, it wasn't even about the money. If Ashley had come to me years ago, before all the favoritism crap became so obvious, I probably would have helped her out. But now? Now it was about the principle. They didn't get to treat me like I didn't matter my whole life and then come crawling to me when things got tough for them. That's not how this worked. I didn't even bother replying to my dad's email. I wasn't going to get sucked into another guilt trip session, especially not after I'd finally started setting boundaries. I told Natalie what was going on, and she was totally supportive, like always. She reminded me that I had every right to say no, that I wasn't being selfish. I was just protecting myself from getting pulled back into their toxic dynamic. But here's the thing. Saying no didn't make me feel as good as I thought it would. Sure, I was standing up for myself, but at the same time, I couldn't shake this weird feeling of guilt. It wasn't that I regretted my decision, but more that I was realizing how deep the issues with my family went. I thought we were making progress, but this whole situation with Ashley and the money just proved that they still didn't get it. They still saw me as the dependable one, the one who was supposed to fix things without ever needing anything in return. In the weeks that followed, I distanced myself even more. I stopped replying to texts, stopped answering calls. I needed space. Natalie and I were focusing on our plans for the future, trying for kids, working on our careers, just living our lives without all the family baggage weighing us down. But every now and then, that nagging feeling would creep back in. Maybe it was because deep down, I still wanted their approval. Maybe I still wanted them to see me, to understand that I wasn't just the black sheep of the family. I was someone who had worked hard, who had built a life on my own without their help. It's been about 6 months since all that went down with Ashley, and honestly, things are still kind of tense. My parents have backed off a bit, but I can tell there's still some resentment there. They don't come out and say it, but I know they're disappointed that I didn't step up for my sister. And Ashley? We haven't talked since she asked for the money. Kyle's kept his distance too, probably because he knows I won't put up with his crap either. In a way, it's been freeing. I'm no longer tied to their expectations, no longer trying to fit into their version of what family should be. I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is set boundaries, even if it means pissing people off. At the end of the day, I've got Natalie, and that's what matters. We're building a life together, and it's a life that's free from all the drama and guilt trips. And as far as my family goes, well, I've realized that I don't need them to approve of me or my choices. I'm enough as I am, and that's all that really matters.